Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to the Shadow Transport Secretary and Shadow Maritime Minister for the solid support we've had over the last year. And thank you to Mick, Daz and the RMT team for inviting me to speak on behalf of the Nautilus members that were impacted. The 17th of March last year was one of the darkest days in our country's maritime history. And a day when P&O Ferries decided to dismiss 786 maritime professionals, RMT members, Nautilus members, and they couldn't even look them in the eyes whilst they did it. They decided to send a video message and that would be enough. To rub salt in that particular wound, those that were then summarily dismissed that day had not enough time to collect personal belongings, had not enough time to pack their working lives away and take it with them. And many of them found that a lot of their personal belongings were simply discarded into the waste bins on board these ships, which is a somewhat apt, if not cruel, metaphor for how the company decided to treat its workforce. So after then hiring private, handcuffed, trained security personnel to escort their former workforce off these vessels, treating the honest and hard-working seafarers with contempt and treating them as little common criminals, they decided to replace them with exploited agency crew recruited from elsewhere on less than minimum wage, destined to spend in many instances as more than 4 months on board these vessels, whereas the previous working rotations was a week or to 2 weeks, depending on the routes that they were on. The actions everyone has agreed are shocking. The government has agreed they're shocking. But action just isn't coming forward for that. A huge public outcry, but this is not new in maritime. As has been mentioned in 2005, Irish Ferries did a very similar thing when they removed their domestically resident seafaring workforce from their vessels and replaced them with cheaper agency crews recruited from abroad. And there has been a consistent effort across the UK shipping industry to undermine terms and conditions for British and UK resident seafarers, particularly if it means being able to bring in labour from elsewhere and to be able to exploit that labour on terms and conditions that are significantly less than what they should be. We see this continuing today with government continuing to extend the offshore wind workers concession to allow for foreign workers ease of access when working in offshore renewable wind sector. We see the government deliberately undermining its Maritime 2050 strategy of strengthening and growing the UK ship register and strengthening and growing UK resident seafarers by allowing for this visa waiver to continue. It's a practice of social dumping, and the government is complicit in allowing it to continue. Now, we have been working with the RMT and with the Shadow Transport team, and we've been working with anyone who will work with us in trying to create a genuine level playing field, because this industry will not survive and will not continue to employ UK resident seafarers if the playing field isn't levelled and levelled up as opposed to played down to the lowest common denominator. It's clear international minimums have no place on a ferry that's running between the UK and France, where it barely enters international waters, where the stretch it runs between Dover and Calais, it crosses the border and goes straight into French territorial waters. There is no place for an international minimum there, and it's not fair nor is it appropriate that companies think that they can get away with paying those rates of pay and treating those seafarers the way that they are being treated. And throughout the last year, the government should and could have worked to close those loopholes in the Trade Union and Labour Relations Consolidation Act that allowed P&O Ferries and Peter Heppelthwaite and his paymasters in DP World to buy their way out of consulting with us, consulting with Nautilus and the RMT. He stated the reason they chose not to consult was because they were consulting on something no trade union would agree. It doesn't make it any better, it doesn't make it any worse. But to be able to think you can ignore key parts of the law and seemingly get away with doing so is an outrage to this very place in which we sit, where these laws are stood and debated. Instead, what the government decided to do was to introduce a bill that undermines the basic democratic right for maritime and other workers to take action against unscrupulous employers to defend what little rights that they have left. Last year, Grant Shapps, the then Transport and now Energy Secretary, although it's difficult to keep up with at times, stated he would hold P&O Ferries accountable to ensure it could never happen again. And as we commemorate that 1-year anniversary, I'm sure you can all see that nothing has happened to stop it from happening again. That nothing is looking like it's going to happen to stop it from happening again. And whilst we do have, going through Parliament, going through this place, the Seafarers' Wages Bill, that does nothing but implement a minimum set of pay for seafarers that should already be paid that. We are bringing these people up to standards that we introduced in this country in 1997. It's an outrage that maritime is that far behind and is treated that badly. So, if the government's serious, they're not going to find us unwilling and unwanting as partners to work with. We have worked with the DfT in giving our feedback and perspective on both the wages bill and what we expect to be a forthcoming welfare charter, and we've been very open with them that it isn't enough. We have been clear on that fact. But they've got to do more. They've got to amend the Trade Union and Labour Relations Act. They've got to outlaw fire and rehire. They've got to address all of the imbalances that have built up that stop workers from being able to stand up for their rights and being treated with dignity and respect. And they have to be transparent on the bilateral agreements so that we can be sure that what they are negotiating between France, between the Netherlands, between Belgium and between other countries where these services operate go beyond minimum wage and look at safe rostering patterns, that look at holiday leave, that look at sick pay, that look at all the entitlements that we as shore-based workers in this country would receive and that our seafarers should receive too. It is a critical moment for the UK maritime industry and for our seafarers. And if government stands by ambition in Maritime 2050 to invest in the maritime workforce, it needs to take action, and that action needs to be now. Nautilus will continue our work with the RMT on this and on other matters in delivering for our seafarers, and we will continue to work with those that wish to work with us to end exploitation and ensure fairness and justice for all maritime workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.